Hi, hello, good morning. Today we are going to be talking about books that really shaped me as a younger reader, and as a person. And I have notes here because we're going to go through quite a number of books and I want to remember what I want to say about them. So if you see me looking down and off to the side, that's what I'm looking at. And without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So, I was very lucky to grow up with bookish parents. I remember the bookshelves in my parents' house growing up were always stuffed to the brim and overflowing. And I loved being able to read more and more of those books as I got older. I remember that I was always read to as a child. My parents always read me bedtime stories, usually my father. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Phantom Tollbooth by James Pfeiffer. This is about a boy named Milo who receives a magical toll booth that transports him to the Kingdom of Wisdom, where he goes on a quest to find the kingdom's two exiled princesses. Are you going to come here? Come here. I remember working through this book chapter by chapter with my father. Okay, lie down. Lie down. I remember working through this book chapter by chapter with my father. And I actually remember trying to put the alarm clock back so that he would think it was earlier than it was, so that I could convince him to read another chapter. And it never worked because he wore a watch, but I tried really hard. This book is quite old. It was published in 1961, but I really think it holds up. It's a book that has a lot of wordplay, puns, uses a lot of idioms, and it really set me up to think about the deeper meaning of words and language and how we construct meaning from those things. Also, there was a dog, and that was really cute and exciting to me. The next book or book series that I'm going to talk about is the Warrior series, which is by Aaron Hunter, who is a collection of authors who work together to write under this pen name. I talked a bit about this in my BookTube introduction video, but this is basically a series, or the first series follows a house cat named Rusty who leaves his pampered house cat life to join a clan of feral cats. And it follows how he goes from just your run-of-the-mill basic apprentice and all the way up to the leader of this clan. And I devoured these books. I think I initially got them from the library, but I very quickly remember progressing to begging my parents to buy them for me. And every time a new one came out, I would immediately be like, did you know the new Warriors is out? Can I get the new Warriors book? And very fortunately, my parents would concede. They would buy me this book and I would read it in like a day. I remember I always had a book with me. Sorry, cat hair. I remember I always had a book with me. I was always reading, even at the dinner table, which my parents somehow allowed. They put up with me just sitting there with my nose in a book while I ate my food. And I even role played warrior cats with my friends who were equally as obsessed as I was. These books are really numerous. They contain many series in this world. And I remember outgrowing the books a little as I got older and as they continued to come out. I think they're still coming out, actually. And based on that, I think that if I read them as an adult now, I would have more criticism. But I refuse to ever do that so I can preserve the magic of what the books once gave me. Next is Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan. This is about a boy named Percy Jackson who discovers he's actually a demigod, and he goes to this camp for demigod kids, and from there he goes on these quests. And unlike Warriors, these books hold up so well as an adult. They're witty, they're quick-paced, and the storytelling is really tight. Like, there's nothing extraneous in these books. And I actually right here have this beautiful collection with these beautiful spines and these gorgeous covers. And in storage, I also have a collector's edition of the first book that has illustrations and like gilded edges. It's really beautiful. I reread these books not infrequently. As I said, they're really witty and fast paced and they're very compelling. When I was a kid, I liked the Greek mythology aspect when I was reading it, but really the main draw for me was the characters. A lot of them are children and were my age when I was reading it, so it was really easy for me to kind of insert myself and pretend that like I was going on those adventures. And also, as an aside, I have been reading the new trilogy that's been coming out about Percy as a late high school student preparing to go to college. I don't like them as much as the originals. The originals will always be just perfect and magical to me, but I have been enjoying them and I find they're equally good, like they're equally quick-witted and tight. And reading them, even though they're different books, really does bring back nostalgia for me. Next is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and I think most of us know this, but the story follows a girl named Katniss. She's from the lowest caste in this 12 caste system, and she gets chosen for this fight to the death that occurs every year. And it's not expected that she will survive, but she does, and she goes on to become a symbol of rebellion against this totalitarian regime that they live in. My parents originally didn't want me reading these because they thought they seemed really violent, but then I read online that the author based it off the story of the Minotaur. And once my mother found out that they were based in Greek mythology, that they were a retelling from Greek mythology, she allowed it. So I read these, again, devoured this trilogy. These books also hold up as an adult. I haven't reread them recently, but I did reread the first one a number of years ago. And I have been reading the prequels as well, although the original series will always be perfection, will always hold in my heart. Despite all the violence and high stakes, I really did think that this story overall, over the course of the three trilogies, was a story of overcoming and hope and what regular people can do to make a difference. The only thing I didn't like was the love triangle between Katniss, Peeta, and Gale, but I just don't like love triangles anyway and never have. But I really honestly think that these books were formative to my sense of justice, to my sense of right and wrong, good and bad, which sounds dramatic, but I think it's true. Okay, moving on to classics. I read Pride and Prejudice in high school. This is by Jane Austen, and it's a love story essentially between a girl named Elizabeth and a man named Mr. Darcy. And this was one of the first classics I read in high school, and I thought it was a great intro to classics. And although my favorite Austen novel is now Emma, Pride and Prejudice still has a special place in my heart. I know there's a famous review that has gone around that's like 1 star. It's just people going to each other's houses. And I think it might be for this, or at least a novel of a similar type. And I think it's hilarious because it's kind of true. It is just people going to each other's houses, and that's kind of the plot, is the interaction between all these characters who are going to each other's houses. The romance is definitely a slow burn and an acquired taste, I think, but worth it in the end, for me at least. And I really want to bring back pining. I want to bring back courting. I want to bring back really getting to know your partner slowly and deliberately. And partially, I just love this aesthetic. I had a dress with an empire waist for a long time that I thought of as my Lizzie Bennet dress, which in retrospect is very cute. Next are a couple of books I'm going to kind of lump together because they're heavy subject matter, and again, they really shaped my ideas about like how I saw the world. The first one is Obasan by Joy Kogawa. She's Canadian. This is written from the perspective of a young child in a Japanese internment camp, and it's quite a devastating book. As I said, it's written from the perspective of a young child. I think she's about 5, if I remember correctly, whose family is interned in a camp for the Japanese Canadians during World War II. Again, I also think this book shaped my idea of what justice looks like, and it certainly introduced me to some of the horrors that humans are capable of particularly horrors that get overlooked in history often. I read about things like concentration camps in history, of course, but a first-person perspective gives you a very different experience than just reading a dry history book, where it's easy to detach yourself from the narrative, especially when that perspective is a child. It's very easy to get attached and to get invested and to feel like it's happening firsthand. And moving right along to our last book, which is a similarly heavy one, as I said. This is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. It's probably her best known work at this point. It follows a woman in a dystopian society where women are essentially just tools for procreation, and have no rights and are not treated as human beings. The ending is quite ambiguous, and it stayed with me for a really long time. Yet another book that shaped my concept of right and wrong, in this case through a feminist lens. I read a quote from Atwood that said she didn't include anything in the book that hadn't happened at some point at somewhere in the world. And that was really chilling to me. And it's scary as we now see what's happening in the political landscape to kind of compare it to what is happening in that book, which is, as I said, very chilling. But it was also scary back then to realize how fragile the women's movement really was and how recently it was that women started to gain rights and started to gain equal footing with men, and how easy it would be to go back to that time where women were essentially cattle. I've honestly never seen the TV show and don't plan to, because this book freaked me out and it really got me thinking, but it freaked me out and I don't think I could handle seeing the TV show. So that concludes the video. I'm really curious to know what books you read as a child, what really shaped you as a reader and also as a person. So let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.